We're going to go ahead and get started. As I want to start off every week, we're going to start with 2 Timothy 2 and verse 15. It says, study to show thyself approved unto God, right? So don't take any man's word for it. Study God's word for yourself and apply it to your life, all right? And you're not going to understand everything. You're not going to know everything. That's why I'm here to help. But also, that's why the scripture says that, we won't see eye to eye until Zion returns, right? Until Christ comes back. We, unto him shall the gathering of the people be, and he will expound everything to us then. But we got to study to show ourselves approved to God. A workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And the more you study, the more you will know how to rightly divide the word of truth, because you can wrongly divide the word of truth. It is possible to do that. All right. So you got to know how to rightly divide the word of truth. All right. So we'll pick up right where we left off last week. I think we read through the first 11 verses last week. I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure we read through the first 11 verses last week. If I'm wrong, y'all correct me in the comments, but I'm pretty sure we read through verse 11. So I'm going to jump down to verse 12 here in Exodus 21. It says, he that smiteth a man so that he die shall be surely put to death, right? So the penalty for murder is death. All right, it's what people now call the death penalty. All right, that's what it was in ancient times as well. Verse 13, and if a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint thee a place whither he shall flee. So I do want to touch on that just for a second. Deuteronomy 19 goes into a little bit more detail about what he's talking about here. He's talking about the cities of refuge. That's what he's talking about. All right. So I do want to touch on that a little bit, just expound on what he means by that. If a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint thee a place whither he shall flee. Right. So it's talking about a situation where one person causes another person's death, but it's accidental. Right. It's not intentional. In Deuteronomy 19, starting with verse 1. It says, when the Lord thy God hath cut off the nations, whose land the Lord thy God giveth thee, and Lord's will, we'll get more into that, about the whole conquering the land of Canaan thing. I don't know if we'll get to that this week. We might have to get to it next week. But it talks about it in Exodus 23. It said, whose land the Lord thy God giveth thee, and thou succeedest them, right, the Canaanites, and dwell in their cities and in their houses, thou shalt separate 3 cities for thee in the midst of thy land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee to possess it. Thou shalt prepare thee a way, and divide the coast of thy land, which the Lord thy God give thee to inherit, into 3 parts, that every slayer may flee thither. Right, so this says 3 cities, right, because Moses had in mind just the west of Jordan. But there are also 3 cities on the east of Jordan as well, where half the tribe of Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben lived. All right, and this is the case of the slayer, which shall flee thither, that he may live. Whoso killeth his neighbor ignorantly, whom he hated not in time past, right? So it wasn't premeditated, is the legal term that we use for it today. That would be, I think that's first degree, is when it's premeditated. This is involuntary manslaughter, what he's talking about. As when a man goeth into the wood with his neighbor to hew wood, and his hand fetch a stroke with his axe to cut down the tree, and the head slip from the helve and light upon his neighbor that he die, he shall flee into one of those cities and live. Right? So, in a situation like that, he gives a very specific example. He's like, let's say that, you have an accident when logging, right? You have a logging accident where, your instrument that you're using, and modern times it'd be a chainsaw, back then it would be an axe, but it accidentally kills your logging partner, right? Or just somebody who's nearby. If that happens, one of the family members of the person who dies would probably, in most cases, want to seek revenge, right? Because they're in the heat of the moment, right? They don't know if you're telling the truth or not. They suspect that it was premeditated, or just they want revenge for their family's sake, right? That's why those cities of refuge were established, so that that man who did it accidentally, right? He didn't mean for nobody to die. He can still live, right? Because there's no reason that he should die. You know what I mean? Lest the avenger of the blood pursue the slayer while his heart is hot, right? He's not thinking rationally. He's not thinking, well, maybe this was an accident. He's thinking, oh, my brother died. I'm trying to avenge my brother, right? Or sister, whatever the case may be. And overtake him because the way is long, and slay him, right? If he's got to go to a further place, right? If he's got to go to a far away city, then he has time to think about the situation, right? And calm down. Think about it rationally. Whereas he was not worthy of death, right? He was not worthy of death because he didn't mean to kill anybody, inasmuch as he hated him not in time past. Wherefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt separate 3 cities for thee. And if the Lord thy God enlarge thy coast, as he has sworn unto thy fathers, and give thee all the land which he promised to give unto thy fathers, if thou shalt keep all these commandments to do them, which I command thee this day, to love the Lord thy God, and to walk ever in his ways, then shalt thou add 3 cities more besides these 3. And that's what I was making reference to earlier. That's what it ends up being when you're reading the book of Joshua. They separate 6 cities of refuge, right? 3 on the east of the Jordan and 3 on the west. That innocent blood be not shed in thy land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance, and so blood be upon thee. Right? So in that situation, that person who caused a death accidentally, they're still innocent in the eyes of God. All right. And verse 11, where it's about to get to here in Exodus 21, it's going to say the same thing. So I'll go ahead and read this here. But if any man hate his neighbor and lie in wait for him, right, if it is premeditated, and rise up against him and smite him mortally that he die, and flee into one of these cities, then the elders of his city shall send and fetch him thence, and deliver him into the hand of the avenger of blood, that he may die. Right? So if you flee to the city of refuge under false pretenses, the judges of that city, the elders of that city, because and we'll see this whenever we get further into these laws, that what Moses is establishing is a system of government where God is the king. All right, and each individual city operates as like a city state with its own judges, its own elders, its own counselors who make the decisions between each individual case, right? And the judges of that city would then find out, they would investigate the matter, they would find out whether you fled to the city of refuge under false pretenses or not. And if you fled under false pretenses, you would be delivered to the man who's, to the person who's avenging, the blood of, whoever they're avenging. But if, you fled to the city of refuge righteously, they would not let that avenger find you, right? Verse 13 says, thine eye shall not pity him, but thou shalt put away the guilt of innocent blood from Israel, that it may go well with thee, right? So if you flee to the city of refuge under false pretenses, then you are guilty, right? So put away that sin, all right? So, back to Exodus 21. So verse 13 is talking about the cities of refuge. Verse 14, but if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, thou shalt take him from mine altar, that he may die. You see that right there. So that's premeditated. Presumptuously with guile. Verse 15, he that smiteth his father or his mother shall be put to death. Right? You can't hit your parents. You'd be put to death. And verse 17 even goes further into that. And he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. Right? Kidnapping, capturing, taking people captive. You can't do that. All right? He will surely be put to death. All right? Or selling them into slavery. You can't do that. All right? Verse 17, and he that curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. Right? And you see that Christ himself even quoted this. I believe in Mark 7 he does, but Matthew 15 maybe it says it more explicitly. For some reason, I'm thinking Matthew 15 instead of Mark 7 on this one. Matthew 15. Yeah. So Matthew 15 and verse. I'm just going to start with verse 1. Then came to Jesus scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, Why do thy disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. Right? So it was a tradition among the scribes and Pharisees where, you got to wash your hands before you eat. It's not necessarily a bad practice, but it's not a law either, right? Like, it's not a sin to, sit down and eat before you wash your hands. Like, that's not a sin at all. Yet the scribes and the Pharisees were rebuking the disciples of Christ because, one day they just rolled up and, started eating a sandwich or whatever, and they didn't wash their hands first. And now, like, they're getting all bent out of shape about it. Verse 3. But he answered and said unto them, Why do ye also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? Right? So Christ said, why are you rebuking us about not washing our hands? That's not even a law. Y'all break laws. Y'all break the law of Moses. Verse 4. For God commanded, saying, Honor thy father and mother, and he that curse father or mother, let him die the death. Right? So that's what we read in Exodus 21 and 15. Verse 17. He that curses father or his mother shall surely be put to death, right? And we read the other last week in the Ten Commandments, right? Verse 5, but ye say, right? So this is an example of what the Pharisees would do. Whosoever shall say to his father or his mother, it is a gift by whatsoever thou might be profited by me, right? So if you did something, it was a scribe slash Pharisee tradition in those days that if you did something substantial for your parents, right, whether it be, you bought them a home, or maybe you had worked for them for a while, or you had did something substantial for them, right, got them a bunch of money, whatever the case may be. You did something substantial for them. You could say, well, I'm a gift to you, right? So I don't necessarily have to abide by those commandments anymore. By whatsoever thou might be profited by me, excuse me. Verse 6, and honor not his father or his mother, he shall be free, right? They can be free from that commandment. When the scriptures never say that you can be free from that commandment. Thus have ye made the commandment of God of none effect by your traditions, right? So, or by your tradition. That's what the scribes and Pharisees would do. They would honor their traditions more than the commandments of God. And that is a spirit that is well alive to this very day. A lot of people in Christianity, y'all keep y'all's own traditions more than the laws of God. That's why it's important that we go through these laws, because y'all ain't never even heard of these laws before, most of y'all. All right. But anyway, that just shows. I just went there to show that Christ, he was never about rejecting the law of Moses. He never said we ain't got to do what Moses said and to hell with what Moses say. He never said that at all. All right. But that's the mentality within the Christian church these days. We ain't got to worry about that as Old Testament. Christ never said any of that. All right? He was rebuking people for rejecting the commandments. All right? But anyway, verse 18. And if men strive together, and one smite another with a stone or with his fist, and he die not, but keep his bed, right? So if he, doesn't die, but he has to sit up for a few days or a few months even, right? Like he's got to go through some short-term or long-term care. If he rise again and walk abroad upon his staff, right? So this is a situation where the guy, he got crippled because of this fight. Then shall he that smote him be quit, meaning acquitted, all right? Only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall cause him to be thoroughly healed, right? So in that situation where, two men are fighting and one really roughs up the other, right? One really hurts the other, you just got to pay for lost time, right? Say he had a job and he would have got paid such and such from that job. Now, basically, you're covering his insurance, right? To put it in modern terms, all right? And shall cause him to be thoroughly healed, all right? So just imagine if men applied this law. Every time you get into a fight with somebody, you know that whatever you do to them, you're going to have to pay for that, right? So just imagine the mentality. People would be less, or rather people would be more hesitant to fight People would be less willing to fight people. All right? Less willing to be violent. They would think about their actions more. This is what the law provides us. All right? And let me just get this right here, because I talked about it last week when we started going into these laws. But I just want to hammer this point home. All right? The reason why we're reading these laws, Romans 7 and verse 14. It says, "For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin." Right? So the law that Moses wrote down for us, that God give us, it's spiritual. All right? It's not just, words on a page. When you apply it to your life, you see the world differently. You will behave differently. You will change your mentality. You will become wise where you were simple and foolish. All right? That's the whole point of the law. And the reason why I'm expounding so much upon these laws, I believe it's 2 Corinthians 3. And I referenced this last week, but I didn't really state it, or rather didn't really go to the scripture. Where is this one? Here we go. This is what I want. 2 Corinthians 3. And I'll start with 4. "And such trust have we through Christ to Godward." Right? We have trust in Christ towards the Most High. "Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think anything as of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God." Right? So we are nothing. God is everything. Verse 6. "Who also have made us able ministers," meaning servants, "of the New Testament, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter killeth, but the Spirit giveth life." So the whole point of learning these laws is to learn the spirit behind these laws. All right. And as we get on down through the chapter, you'll see what he means when he says the letter killeth. All right. He's referring to the judgments. The judgments are like when we get on down, or even like right here where it says in verse 17, "And he that curse his father or his mother shall surely be put to death." Right? Like, I'm not saying, if you hear somebody talk bad about their parents, go kill them. No, that's not the point. All right? The letter, like if you were under Moses, like if Moses was around and, you were living back then yeah, he would have put you to death. But now we look at it and we have mercy on people who have sinned, and we just correct them and say, "Hey, that's wrong, brother. Hey, get right." You see what I'm saying? Hey, you shouldn't be talking about your parents like that. You know what I'm saying? But the letter says put them to death. The Spirit is change. The Spirit is change according to the law. It's correction according to the law. All right? So, Exodus 21 and 20. "And if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall surely be punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money." Right? So, again, remember the context of this chapter. We talked about it last week. We didn't really touch on verse 1 this week, or rather, verse 2 talks about Hebrew servants, right? So the context of this chapter is mostly about Hebrew servants, but I'm willing to say that this one is about non-Hebrew servants, because in Leviticus 25 it talks about the difference in a Hebrew servant and a non-Hebrew servant. All right, Israelite who's working for you and a heathen who is working for you. Right, the other nations who are working for you. All right, and again, this is during the time of Moses, not necessarily today, because there are labor laws today. Right. And that really governs how you treat your employees. But in the law, in Leviticus 25, the difference in a Hebrew servant and a non-Hebrew servant, right? The difference in an Israelite servant and a non-Israelite servant. In Leviticus 25, jumping down to verse, I think 35. No, actually, no, I'll start with 35. 35 is good. So Leviticus 25 and 35, it says, "And if thy brother be waxen poor," right? When he says your brother, he's talking about of your people, right? An Israelite. If your Israelite brother be waxing poor and fallen in decay with thee, then thou shalt relieve him. Yea, though he be a stranger or sojourner, that he may live with thee, right? So he's saying, help out the poor of your people. Take thou no usury of him, meaning don't charge him interest on a loan, all right? Or increase, right? So it says, take thou no usury of him or increase, right? Because some definitions you look at usury, and I just want to point this out real quick. Google for usury. So if you just look at like dictionary.com or maybe this is oxfordlanguages.com, I don't know where Google is pulling this from, but it says the illegal action the illegal action or practice of lending money at unreasonably high rates of interest. Right, like some synonyms are payday lending, loan sharking. What is that? Shylocking? I don't know what that means. Archaic says interest at unreasonably high rates, right? So some definitions say interest at unreasonably high rates, but there's another one here in Merriam-Webster where on Merriam-Webster it gives the definition of usury just the lending of money with an interest charge for its use. You see that right there? So any interest is usury according to Merriam-Webster, right? So there's different definitions. Some say usury is extremely high interest. Some definitions say usury is interest at all, all right? And even the second definition says here, an unconscionable or exorbitant rate or amount of interest. And the archaic definition, I'm looking specifically at archaic definitions because, you know, the Bible was translated in the 1600s. When it just says interest, all right? Interest is usury, any kind of interest. But the Bible does make it clear here where it says, take down no usury of him or increase, right? So any kind of increase. So even if your definition of usury is extremely high interest, if you're loaning to an Israelite, you can't even have any kind of increase, right? Like a 5% interest rate is not exorbitantly high, but it's still unlawful because it's increase on the loan. You see what I'm saying? If you're loaning to an Israelite. Continuing verse 36. It says, but fear thy God, that thy brother may live with thee. Thou shalt not give him thy money upon usury, nor lend him thy victuals for increase. You see it right there? So it makes it clear what he's talking about. He's not talking about you can't lend extremely high rates. He's saying you can't lend at any rates of usury or interest at all when it comes to loaning to Israelites. For example, I loan my brother $100. He pays me back $100, not $105, not $120, but $100. It's the same both ways. You see what I'm saying? No interest at all. I am the Lord your God, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. Verse 39. And if thy brother that dwelleth by thee be waxen poor and be sold unto thee, right? Because back then, it was very socially acceptable to sell yourself as an indentured servant if you got into debt with somebody. Thou shalt not compel him to serve as a bondservant, right? So even in a situation where someone who is an Israelite sells themselves to you as an indentured servant, you can't treat him like a slave, all right? Verse 40, but as a hired servant, right, as an employee, and as a sojourner, he shall be with thee, and shall serve thee until the year of Jubilee, right? So that would be, it talks about that earlier in the chapter. Perhaps we'll get to that at some point, not this week, but the year of Jubilee is every 50th year. It's just a big celebration all year, all right? And maybe we'll get more into it if we have time, but it's not going to be this week. And then shall he depart from thee, both he and his children with him, and shall return unto his own family, and unto the possession of his fathers shall he return, right, to his own land. For they are my servants, which I brought forth out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as bondmen, right? You can't treat them like slaves. You can't treat Hebrew servants like slaves. And pretty sure I did read this last week because, we were talking about Hebrew servants. I think I did read this part last week. But the next part, I'm pretty sure I didn't read. Maybe I did, but it's important to know this this law as well, though, because verse 20 and 21 in Exodus 21. Right, so God said they are his servants, right? So you can't treat Israelites like slaves because they're actually God's servants, not yours. Thou shalt not rule over him with rigor, but shalt fear thy God. You see that right there? So that's why I think this is not talking about Hebrew servants here in Exodus 21, because, and specifically verses 20 and 21, because it's talking about beating them, right? So that's rigor. Right, so that's why I don't think this is talking about Hebrew servants. Verse 44, it says, both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids which thou shalt have shall be of the heathen that are round about you. Right, but non-Israelites you can treat them like slaves. Of them shall ye buy bondmen and bondmaids. Moreover, of the children of the strangers that do sojourn among you, of them shall ye buy, and of their families that are with you, which they begat in your land, they shall be your possession. And that's what you see with the Canaanites. That's what you see with the Israelites and the Canaanites. Once the Israelites took over the land of Canaan, they subjected the Canaanites to that same bondage that it's talking about here. All right, and ye shall take them as an inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them for a possession, and they shall be your bondmen forever. But over your brethren, the children of Israel, you shall not rule one over another with rigor. And I just want to prove this here when it comes to Canaan. All right, and I think we're actually going to get into Canaan next week, as far as why God subjected them to this of being the servant to the Israelites, being the bond servants, being the slaves to the Israelites. In Genesis 9, at the end of Genesis 9, it says, Genesis 9 verse 26. I'm not going to get into the context of this. In Bible History 101, we talked about it. But I just want to get to the prophecy. And he said, blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. All right, it was already prophesied from the beginning. God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. You see that right there? So it's reiterated. It's said twice. It's stated twice by the prophet Noah. He said, look, Canaan's going to be a servant. That's his role, and we will get into that at some point. It's not looking like we're going to be able to get to it this week, but when we get to Exodus 23, that's when we'll get into Canaan, because that's what it talks all about Canaan and what they've done, and we'll actually go, precept upon precept and explain that. But when it comes to this situation right here, when it says, over your brethren, the children of Israel, you shall not rule one over another with rigor. That's why I think here in Exodus 21, verse 20 and 21, this is talking about non-Israelite servants, because you're not supposed to rule harshly. You're not supposed to be harsh with your Hebrew servants. So I doubt it even the law would even permit beating them in any case. But obviously it permits that with certain servants. All right. But you can't beat them to death. All right. As it says in verse 20, if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod and he die under his hand, he shall surely be punished. Right? You're not supposed to beat slaves to death. That's not right. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he should not be punished, for he is his money. Right? So bond servants you can treat harshly, but you can't just outright kill them for no reason. That's not right. That's unlawful. Verse 22. If men strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished, according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. You see that right there? So people use this, like people, which is really wild. Pro-choice people use this to say, look, in the Bible, babies in the womb or fetuses aren't considered babies, aren't considered people, because it talks about paying instead of putting them to death. But first of all, usually those pro-choice people are feminists, and this is clearly not a feminist sentiment. This is saying, look, it's according to the husband, it's his child, the woman's just carrying it, it's his seed, right? That's what this is saying here. Hurt a woman with child so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, meaning the man's not trying to get back in his own personal way, or the woman's not trying to get back in her own personal way to the person who did this. It said, he shall surely be punished, right? The man who hurt the woman with child, according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, right? So if the man said, yeah, that was my baby, this guy deserves to die, then that'll be up to the judges, right? He shall pay as the judges determine. Or if he just says, hey, look, give me, $1,000, then it would be $1,000. It's up to the woman's husband, all right? That's literally what it says. But verse 23, and if any mischief follow, then thou shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. So whatever the case may be, whatever mischief, whatever kind of get backs, vengeance, plots that each of these people had going on, you gotta make restitution for all that stuff, right? Like it said eye for an eye, right? Like for example, if the two were fighting, the one has a pregnant wife, this one who's fighting him accidentally causes that woman to have a miscarriage, and then the guy who was the husband of that woman who lost his child, now he goes and stabs the dude in the eye. Well, now buddy who lost the baby, now he's got to lose an eye too, right? So all this like get back, vengeance plots, like it's all fruitless. It's all pointless. That's the whole point of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth is supposed to teach people, look, like all this getting your own vengeance is pointless. You hurt someone else, that hurt is coming back on you, right? That's the whole point of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So understand this, that where is it at in Deuteronomy 32 about vengeance? Where are we at? About vengeance. Okay, here we go. So this is the song of the Lord. Let's see. Verse 35, it says, to me belong vengeance and recompense. You see that right there? So the Lord said, to him belongs vengeance and recompense. All right? Their foot shall slide in due time. Right? So anybody who does you wrong, this is talking about the heathen, I believe, but anybody who does you wrong, their foot shall slide in due time. Don't try to get vengeance on yourself. Don't try to do something, that'll get you out the spirit. All right? For the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. Right? God will do it quickly. If you just sit back and, I know they did me wrong, but I ain't going to do nothing about it. I'm just going to sit back. You'll see how God works. If you try to do and apply what this word says, you will see how God works. All right? So, verse 36. For the Lord shall judge his people and repent himself for his servants, when he seeth that their power is gone and there is none shut up or left, right? So when God sees that you're not trying to afflict people with your own power, right? I'm taking this to a personal level. This is talking about on a national level, right? About that God will save his people and deliver them from all places around the world. But I'm bringing this to an area where we can apply it to our lives. When God sees that you're not trying to afflict with whatever power that you have, he said, okay, I'm going to use my power now and fight for them, right? So jumping down to verse 43, it says, rejoice, O ye nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants, right? So God will avenge the blood of his servants and will render vengeance to his adversaries and will be merciful unto his land and to his people. You see that right there? So if you are God's people, then God will be merciful to you. He will be merciful, and he will bring vengeance upon those who've been an adversary to you, because guess what? That means they've been an adversary to God as well. All right? So That's what an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. All that is supposed to teach you, look, just understand whatever you do to someone else is going to come right back to you. Vengeance belongs to the Lord, and don't try to take vengeance into your own hands. All right? Verse 26. And if a man smite the eye of his servant or the eye of his maid that it perish, he shall let him go for free, for his eye's sake. And if he smite out his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. See, this I do believe is talking about a Hebrew servant. Because we just read that a man can beat his slave, but as long as they don't die, then it's all good. But this right here says that if an eye, if an eye perishes, use the word perish, then you got to free him. Right, so I believe this is talking about two different types of servants here, or like if you knock a tooth out, that tooth has to, or rather, if you knock a tooth out, you have to free that person for their tooth's sake. I think this is applying to the servants that you cannot roll over with rigor, as to use the words that the scriptures say. Verse 28. If an ox gore a man or a woman that they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned. And his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be acquitted. Right? So God even had judgment for unruly animals. All right. Verse 29. But if the ox were wont to push with his horn in time past, and it hath been testified to his owner, and he hath not kept him in, but that he hath killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and his owner also shall be put to death. Right? Because you didn't rein in your unruly animals, right? You just let your animals run amok, then okay, you are now responsible for whatever that animal does. All right? Verse 30. If there be laid on him a sum of money, then he shall give for the ransom of his life whatsoever is laid upon him. Right? So instead of being put to death, he can buy himself out of the situation, if that's an option given to him by the judges. Whether he have gored a son or have gored a daughter, according to this judgment shall it be done unto him. Right? And in judgment, it's equal. Right? Verse 32. If the ox shall push a manservant or a maidservant, he shall give unto their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. Right? So you have to pay for that servant that died. All right? Verse 33. And if a man shall open a pit, or if a man shall dig a pit and not cover it, and the ox or an ass fall therein, the owner of the pit shall make it good, and give money unto the owner of them, and the dead beast shall be his. You see that right there? So, if you are responsible for the death of one of another person's animals, then you have to make restitution for that. All right? Very simple. Very simple. You got to make restitution for the things that you are responsible for. You got to be held accountable. That's an easy way to sum this up. You must be held accountable for your actions and your mistakes. Verse 35. And if one man's ox hurt another's that he die, then they shall sell the live ox and divide the money of it, and the dead ox also they shall divide. Or if it be known that the ox hath used to push in time past, and his owner hath not kept him in, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead shall be his own. You see that right there? So, again, you must be held accountable for your actions, and if you knew that your animals are unruly, you must be held accountable for your animals' actions as well. You must be held responsible. All right? That's what it all boils down to. When it comes to those property laws, you must be held responsible. All right? And accountable. Exodus 22, starting with verse 1. If a man steal an ox or a sheep and kill it or sell it, he shall restore 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. Right? So, back then, and I'm sure even now, that like cattle was very expensive, right? Very expensive compared to other animals because they're larger and they take, more food required, and they can feed somebody for a lot longer, right? So if you steal an ox, then you got to restore 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep, right? So the larger the theft, the booty is, the more you must restore for that. All right. Verse 2. And I do want to point out that judgment for stealing is not death. In the law of Moses, judgment for stealing was not death. It wasn't you lose a hand like what it is in Muslim countries, right? They made that up. That's not what it says in the Bible. It's just that, hey, you stole something of value, you must restore that fourfold, fivefold, depending on how much it cost, right? Verse 2. If a thief be found breaking up, right? Another word for breaking up is breaking in, all right? And be smitten that he die, there shall no blood be shed for him, right? So this is that castle doctrine, right? So a thief is breaking in the middle of the night. You don't know what's going on. They could be breaking in to murder you, right? So you defend yourself and your family, and they die. Oh well, he shouldn't have been breaking in. Verse 3, if the sun be risen upon him, there shall be blood shed for him, right? But if he does it in the daytime and you can see what's going on, you can see that he's just stealing something and you kill him, well, yeah, you can't do that because you know the situation. It was apparent what was going on, and, that's still murder, all right? For he should make full restitution, right? So, a thief, as far as like, if you know what's going on and you see that he's stealing, it should just be that he has to give that back or make full restitution, as it says, or, depending on what he steals, fourfold, fivefold, doublefold, I think is what we're about to see. But either way, when it comes to stealing, as we just determined with verse 1, the penalty for theft is not murder, is not death. You see what I'm saying? The penalty for theft is not death. All right? And it never was. All right? So if you know that it's just somebody trying to steal something, trying to rob something from you, okay, hey, you got to let them take it. It is what it is. If you know that situation. Now, again, if it's the middle of the night, you don't know what's going on, you just hear somebody breaking in and he dies, oh well. That's not your fault. But you know what he's trying to steal. You know that he's just trying to steal something. Okay, let him take it. Because God's going to make him restore it. Right? That's what it said. For he should make full restitution. And I do just want to point this out because I have been going back and forth as far as like to the New Testament as well, how we apply these laws in Christ. And I do just want to point out, because you may think that like, oh, thieves are getting off easy or whatever. Just because, the scriptures say don't kill a thief. Allow him to make restitution. In Ephesians 4, it talks about thieves. Where is he at? Ephesians 4 verse 28. Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands the thing which is good, that he may give to him that needeth. You see that right there? So, if you're a thief, stop stealing. Just get a job and pay back what you stole. That's what you should do. All right. The penalty for theft is not death, but hey, the wages of sin is death. And if you just keep that mentality of, well, I'm just gonna steal everything and I'm gonna be all right. No, you're not. God's gonna kill you because it's all gonna add up eventually. And it's going to be way more than what you can pay back. So it says, for he should make full restitution. If he have nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. You see that right there? Okay, well, you can't pay it back. Well, I guess you're going to be an indentured servant now. You got to work to pay it off. It's kind of like if somebody goes to a restaurant and they don't have no money to pay for the food that they ate. Okay, get in the kitchen. you gonna do some dishes. You gonna cook some food. You gonna work off what you've taken, basically. Verse 4: if the theft be certainly found in his hand alive, whether it be ox or ass or sheep, he shall restore double. Right. So restore double. Right. So in some cases it's the difference in verse 1 and verse 4 is that it's a stolen ox or sheep that is killed or sold, right? But if it's still alive, like he still has it, he can give that back plus another one, right? But if he's already killed the animal or sold it or the item, whatever the case may be, then it's worse than if he still has it, because he can just give it back if he still has it, right? Plus another one. As it says, he shall restore double. Verse 5, if a man shall cause a field or vineyard to be eaten, and shall put in his beast, and shall feed in another man's field, of the best of his own field, and of the best of his own vineyard shall he make restitution. You see it right there. So you can't just, take someone's stuff, especially in this case, when we're talking about food. You can't take someone's food and expect to, just get away with that. You got to give the best of what you have. Verse 6, if fire break out and catch in thorns, so that the stacks of corn or the standing corn or the field be consumed therewith, he that kindled the fire shall surely make restitution. You see that right there. So again, it's about destroying property and making restitution according to the value of that property. All right. Again, being held accountable, being held responsible for your actions. And this is specifically, I do want to reiterate in verse 5, it was lawful, like in Deuteronomy 23, and I believe it may even say this later down in Exodus 22, or in Exodus 23. But in Deuteronomy 23, it was lawful for if you were just walking and you just happened to come across some grapes or some, is it 23? Deuteronomy 23? Yes. Some grapes or some corn. Like, it was lawful to just grab a bite. That's fine. Deuteronomy 23 and verse 24, when thou come into thy neighbor's vineyard, then thou may eat grapes at thy field at thine own pleasure, but thou shalt not put any in thy vessel. Right? You can't take any to go, but you can eat some while you're there. Verse 25, when thou come into the standing corn of thy neighbor, then thou mayest pluck the ears with thy hand, but thou shalt not move a sickle upon thy neighbor's standing corn. Right? So again, you can have you have a little, but you can't just take a whole lot. You can have whatever you can eat right there at that moment. But as it said right here, you can't put in your beast, right, to feed in another man's field, because, they eat way more than people. Let's see. He that kindled the fire shall surely make restitution, being held accountable, being held responsible for any property that you damage. Verse 7. If a man shall deliver unto his neighbor money or stuff to keep, and it be stolen out of the man's house, if the thief be found, let him pay double. If the thief be not found, then the master of the house shall be brought unto the judges, to see whether he had put his hand into his neighbor's goods, right? Because you could easily have a situation where, somebody say, hey, hold on to this for me, and then the person who is being asked to hold on to it, he goes and sells it, or he, hides it, so, somebody come in and stole it, right? So you take it to the judges, and the judge is going to be able to determine. Verse 9, they'll do an investigation. For all manner of trespass, whether it be for ox, for ass, for sheep, for raiment, or for any manner of lost thing, which another challengeth to be his, the cause of both parties shall come before the judges, and whom the judges shall condemn, he shall pay double unto his neighbor. Right? So anything that, is stolen or, taken by guile and deceit, you got to restore double. All right? Verse 10. If a man deliver unto his neighbor an ass or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep, and it die or be hurt or driven away, no man seeing it, then shall an oath of the Lord be between them both, that he hath not put his hand unto his neighbor's goods, and the owner of it shall accept thereof, and he shall not make it good. You see that right there? So if you are pet sitting, or in this case it would be farm animal sitting, I guess that would still be considered pet sitting, and it run away or it die or whatever the case may be, it gets hurt. As long as you, in this situation it says, make an oath to the Lord, right? Swear to the Most High that, you didn't have anything to do with it, and it's all fine. All should be forgiven. You see what I'm saying? Now I would say don't even swear, because Christ, he said don't swear at all. Right? Because let me read this real quick. Now, let the scriptures do the talking here. So in Matthew 5, want to say it's 30 something. Let's see. Yeah, vows. Verse 33. Again, ye have heard that it hath been said by them of all time, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. Right? So forswearing thyself is like making an oath to the Lord while lying. Right? You should not do that. Verse 34. But I say unto you, swear not at all. Right? So Christ said, look, don't make no oaths. Neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou cannot make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. Right? So Christ said, look, I know y'all's history, I know y'all's experience, or I've seen what y'all act like. Don't even make any oaths, because you always break them. You're always lying. You're never worthy to keep any kind of oath that you make. So I would say if any kind of situation like this that you may deal with, like, you know, again, the pet sitting thing and something happens to it, just, yes, you did do it. No, you did not do it. And the Lord gonna judge you. Because that's the whole point here in verse 11. Then shall an oath of the Lord be between them both. The reason why it says, okay, you got to make an oath to the Lord concerning this case is because God's going to judge you, no matter what the situation is, right? God's going to judge you. And if you're being honest, God will uphold that and he will not punish you. But if you're lying, then God will specifically judge you accordingly, right? So that's why I'm talking about an oath to the Lord. But Christ let us know, hey, even in simple, clear communication, yay, yay, nay, nay, God's still going to be the judge, right? So if you're lying, God's still going to judge you. God's still going to punish you accordingly. All right, so verse 12, he said, he shall not make good, and if it be stolen from him, he shall make restitution unto the owner thereof, right? So in a situation where the pet was stolen, you got to make restitution. If it be torn in pieces, then let him bring it for witness, and he shall not make good that which was torn, right? So like for example, like you're babysitting a dog or whatever, a little poodle, and a coyote eats it up or whatever. You just show the evidence of that, and like, hey, there's nothing I can do about that. You wouldn't have to make restitution in that case. Verse 14, and if a man borrow aught of his neighbor, and it be hurt or die, the owner thereof being not with it, he shall surely make it good, right? Because you wasn't watching over it. You wasn't doing what you're supposed to. Again, you're going to be held responsible because you must be held accountable. Verse 15, but if the owner thereof be with it, he shall not make it good. If it be a hired thing, it came for his hire, right? So, but if you were with it and you did everything to protect it, and, you know, something still happened, well, things happen, right?